Next question. Order. The member for Cambridge.
Question is for the Premier. Last week, after months of watching owners of restaurants and bars have to close down their businesses, the government made changes to increase the capacity limits for restaurants, bars, and other food and drink establishments in the red and orange zones. For months, establishments in the red zone could only allow 10 people in their premises, and in the orange zone, 50. The government had the power, due to Bill 195, to make these changes earlier without requiring a vote in this legislature and before many went out of business. What took the government so long?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, I would say to the member opposite, the need for public health measures. We have to keep the level of transmission of COVID-19 under control as much as we can. That's what we've been working towards. The variants of concern have considerably upset the direction that we were headed, because the variants of concern, the UK, Brazilian and South African, are much more transmissible. They end up in more hospitalizations, more severe cases of COVID, and sadly, more deaths. That is what we've been following all along. We've been listening to our public health experts, Dr. Williams and the Public Health Measures Table, and we had to wait until they felt that changes could be made for the health and safety of all Ontarians, and that's exactly what we did.
And the supplementary question.
Well, despite their pious claims to the contrary, it doesn't appear that the government is following much science in its decision-making. On the same day last week that capacity limits were increased in red and orange zones, total COVID cases in Ontario spiked to over 1,700 daily for each of the last 3 days. Last November, when these red and orange capacity limits were set, COVID cases on that day were just over 1,300. What part of the science is the government following when it decides after months to let restaurants operate even when daily COVID cases are increasing? Couldn't this same decision have been made months ago before thousands were forced to close down their restaurants due to the government's questionable decision-making?
And the Minister of Health.
Thank you. Well, once again, we follow public health measures. There were changes that were made, particularly in areas in Grey, in Peel, and Toronto, to allow for outdoor patios to open as long as the physical distancing measures were followed. But the difference, of course, is the variants of concern. With the original COVID cases moving downward, we could see, and Dr. Brown and his table told us that in their modelling that we could see the variants of concern taking over from the original COVID, which we are now seeing. But we are watching that very carefully. We're watching what's happening in our hospitals. We're watching to make sure that our ICU beds are not going to be overwhelmed. So we are doing, all of the work that we're doing is in accordance with the advice that's being given to us by Dr. Williams and the Public Health Measures Table, because our first and foremost priority is the health and safety of all Ontarians.